welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to completely shatter your preconceived notions of what rest actually means. We're diving straight into the Old Testament to uncover this rigorous ancient concept. And let me tell you, it is way more dynamic, literally world-altering, than just taking a Sunday afternoon nap.
You know, we moderns usually think of rest as, well, passivity, right? A vacation, a spa day, or just finally catching a break at the end of a long emotional struggle. But the ancient biblical writers, they saw it entirely differently. To them, rest meant cosmic order. It meant political freedom and geographical stability. They weren't picturing a day at the beach. They were picturing a victorious king finally taking his throne to rule and establish justice after decisively defeating chaos.
Here's our roadmap for the explainer today. We'll start by redefining biblical rest. Then we'll look at cosmic order and stability, securing the covenant space, the war of allegiance, false rest and anti-rest, and finally wrap up with the new creation promise.
So let's jump right in with Section 1, Redefining Biblical Rest, Beyond the Devotional Gloss.
Now these Hebrew words you see here, Shabbat and Nuach, they really don't mean relaxation the way we experience it today. When an ancient Israelite heard these words, they weren't thinking of leisure time. Actually, they signify the stabilization of life itself. They describe the removal of a grave threat, the resolution of severe turbulence, and the absolute end of crushing, oppressive labor. It's like taking a chaotic, wildly threatening situation and firmly settling it into a secure, ordered, and flourishing state.
Moving on to Section 2, Cosmic Order and Stability, the Creation and Sabbath Templates.
Okay, so think about Genesis. God resting there isn't about him being tired or fatigued from a long week of work. Honestly, it's about God taking up his rightful rule in a stable, habitable cosmos that is now entirely free from chaos. The work of creating order is done, so the king sits on his throne to reign over it. True rest, in this ancient context, equals God enthroned within an ordered creation. So it isn't a picture of leisure at all. It is absolutely a picture of sovereign reign.
And this dual foundation of the Sabbath, it is absolutely fascinating. On one hand, you've got this creation-based mandate rooted in Exodus 20, where Israel is called to imitate divine rule and literally participate in God's cosmic order. But then, on the other hand, you have a redemption-based mandate in Deuteronomy 5, which explicitly celebrates freedom from slavery in Egypt. Put those together, and this makes the Sabbath far more than just some optional spirituality for exhausted people. It is a fierce, political, theological refusal to live under Pharaoh-like systems of endless, coercive production. It's a definitive, weekly declaration that time belongs to Yahweh, not to our endless labor quotas.
Which brings us to Section 3, Securing the Covenant Space, Joshua's Paradox.
Now we run into a fascinating mystery in the book of Joshua. If God gave Israel rest in the Promised Land, why in the world did they still have to fight so relentlessly? Well, Joshua forces a critical distinction between two distinct layers of rest. First, there's conquest rest. This is God's decisive overarching act to subdue chaos, break enemy coalitions, and generously gift the land. But then, and this is crucial, there's faithfulness rest. This represents Israel's ongoing responsibility to maintain that divine order and strictly refuse syncretism. Essentially, God establishes the rest, but Israel must actively maintain the environment through ongoing obedience so that the chaos doesn't come rushing right back in.
Because of that, Joshua chapters 13 to 24 are far from boring administrative filler. I know they can read that way sometimes, but they are actually the architectural pillars required for rest maintenance. You've got presence ordering with the sanctuary at Shiloh, justice ordering with regulated refuge cities, instruction ordering through distributed Levitical cities, and allegiance ordering. Let's just look at the justice ordering of those refuge cities for a second. These weren't just random towns. They were legally regulated spaces that ensured accidental deaths didn't violently spiral into endless chaotic blood feuds across generations. These structures were strictly required to prevent ancient society from devolving into internal chaos. They were literally the architecture of rest.
This perfectly sets up Section 4, the War of Allegiance, the Fragility of Rest.
So what happens when that maintenance fails? The war shifts from the physical battlefield directly to the human heart. And this creates that tragic, repeating cycle we see all throughout the book of Judges. It starts with idolatry, a fundamental covenant breach. That spiritual failure actively invites chaos back in, leading straight to oppression, which is essentially the state of anti-rest. The crushed people then cry out for help. A deliverer is raised by God. And finally, the land has rest again. This violent cycle proves for sure that rest isn't guaranteed just by standing on the right piece of geography. It is highly fragile, and it collapses the exact moment covenant fidelity collapses.
Now, look at this. Psalm 95 actually reactivates the wilderness warning for people who are already living in the Promised Land. The psalmist insists that entering God's rest requires an ongoing, today submission to God's governance. You can physically live in the land of rest, totally surrounded by the architecture of peace, but still be completely outside of God's true rest if your heart is hard, stubborn, and rebellious.
Let's look at how the prophets handled this in Section 5. False rest and anti-rest. The prophetic warning.
Prophets like Jeremiah and Amos, they looked around their society and fiercely exposed what they called false rest. You know what that is? It's that dangerous, toxic illusion of peace maintained by the privileged, entirely while exploiting the vulnerable and marginalized. This society might have looked incredibly stable on the outside, but they were treating the temple like a magic charm to excuse their covenant rebellion and internal corruption. It was a complete counterfeit stability.
Jeremiah literally pleads with the people to stand by the roads and walk the ancient covenant paths to find true, stabilized rest for their souls. And let's be clear, this isn't just some therapeutic, comforting phrase you embroider on a pillow, it is an urgent call to covenant obedience. But, as we know, the people's stubborn refusal leads directly to the ultimate anti-rest: exile.
You see, exile isn't just a geographical relocation. It's not a mere change of address. It is the tragic, systematic unmaking of ordered life. It means the profound loss of land and geographical security, the sanctuary completely destroyed, the divine presence departing, kingship destabilized, and the entire social order totally fractured. In the biblical imagination, this is a terrifying plunge back into the dark, formless chaos that existed before creation. It is the absolute unwinding of rest.
But there's hope, which brings us to our final section. Section 6, the new creation promise. Rest rebuilt from the inside out.
Thankfully, the story doesn't end in the despair of exile. Prophets like Ezekiel realize something crucial. Simply building stronger physical walls or new political structures won't ever preserve rest if the human heart keeps producing the exact same idolatry that ruined it the first time around. So he prophesies a magnificent new creation rest where God fundamentally remakes his people from the inside out. We are talking about a total cleansing from defilement, a brand new heart, a new spirit, enabling real lasting obedience, and the ultimate return of God's holy presence. The broken engine of human allegiance is finally, permanently fixed.
And notice how Isaiah links true, durable rest directly to justice and righteousness under a spirit-governed messianic rule. Peace isn't just the quiet absence of armed conflict, right? It is the flourishing social atmosphere naturally produced when an entire community is rightly ordered under God's truth and justice. Righteousness is the root, and peaceful, secure resting places are the beautiful effect.
So ultimately, the Old Testament's true rest is a comprehensively ordered life under divine kingship. It is constantly contested by the forces of chaos, for sure, but it is sustained by steadfast covenant fidelity. Rest is absolutely not passivity. It's a vibrant, deeply stabilized existence achieved exclusively by God's victory and maintained by our faithful, active allegiance to Him.
Which leaves us with this final provocative question to think about today. If true rest actually requires ordered allegiance to a righteous king, whose order are you resting in right now? What are the systems, the habits, or the rulers that you actually trust to give you true peace and stability in your own life? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.